For the benefit of the audience who may not have caught on yet, the kind of cancer that you have is metastatic breast cancer.
Yeah.
Okay. And in terms of kind of how people react to you and talk to you,
nobody sort of treats me as me anymore. I'm not Charlie. I'm now Cancer Charlie. So I feel like I have to step out of my front door with my cape on and my mask on and be very much everything is brilliant. I'm absolutely fine, because nobody wants to hear the real answers of emotionally what's going on, or physically what the chemotherapy is doing to my body.
Right, so in terms of how you even discovered that you had cancer in the first place, how was that diagnosis made? What actually happened?
Okay, so for me personally, I found a lump in my right breast, but we're going right back to June of 2017.
Okay, and were you doing what we're all told to check your breasts? Because I don't even know how to do that, even though I've looked at videos and things.
Yeah.
So you weren't not looking.
Not at all.
Right.
No. It was simply a case of I was laid in bed with my hand on my boob because it was comfortable, and I've breastfed 3 children, so they're not voluptuous breasts.
Yep.
So I just happened to notice that I had a pea-sized hard lump. So which
Right.
then I then had a bit of a feel of, asked my husband to have a feel, and he was like, no, that's definitely like a lump, as opposed to sort of premenstrual lumpy boobs, which we all get.
So you just knew that it felt...
It just
felt
wasn't
different.
quite right.
Okay.
So I went to my local GP, and she had a feel of it, and she agreed that it didn't feel right. But she did say to me, it's probably nothing because you're only 31, so it's probably nothing, but we'll send you to have it checked just in case, as we do with all lumps. Absolutely fine. So I went on what they call fast track 2-week emergency waiting list. So within 2 weeks, went to the Churchill Hospital, to their cancer and haematology centre, and had an appointment. Now, because I'm at the time I was 31, their procedure is to scan using an ultrasound like you do for pregnancy. And if that ultrasound shows any abnormalities, then they look at further testing.
So they don't do a biopsy on a lump at this point in time?
No.
Right.
But if you are 40 and over, it is standard procedure to do a ultrasound, a biopsy and a mammogram.
Right.
So me at 31, I go in, I have the scan. And on my scan at the time, there was no abnormalities shown, which is actually not uncommon because 50% of early breast cancer shows as normal on an ultrasound scan.
Okay, so that means they are okay. So you've just got a lump, but everything's fine.
Yes. So my personal experience actually was not very pleasant either, because the lady who scanned me was quite flippant with me, and said to me, well, it's just normal breast tissue. You're 31, it's normal breast tissue, what did you expect?
Okay.
So I actually left feeling like I shouldn't have made a fuss and gone in the first place.
Because you're wasting the time of somebody who might have cancer.
Exactly, and because I was only 31, so it was quite clearly just breast tissue.
Yeah.
Was how I felt when I left.
Okay.
So off we go, and then April of this year.
So this was last June, July. June.
So that was last June 2017.
And everything's fine. You're not worried.
Told me it was absolutely fine.
Okay. Yeah.
And I left. That was all the tests that was done. There was no checkup test. There was nothing. So June of this year, in the shower.
April.
No, June of this year.
Okay.
April of last year.
April of last year.
June of this year.
Sorry.
Beginning of June this year. I was in the shower and realised that actually the lump was significantly bigger. And I hadn't noticed prior to June that it had changed and had got bigger, but because I was told it was normal, I just didn't acknowledge that it had got bigger, because I'd already been told that the lump was normal. While in the shower, I then realised that I had actually had a lump in my armpit, which kind of was a red flag for me, because I thought, well, that's not good. This lump's got a bigger lump in my armpit. So I went back to the GP, which I wouldn't have done if I hadn't found the lump in the armpit. Went back to my GP, who referred me back up to the hospital, same scenario. Went back up to the hospital, it was the same lady that scanned me. So I looked at my husband and I was like, oh no. And this time, the second she started the ultrasound, her whole persona was totally different. So I knew something wasn't right. She was at her bedside manner was suddenly quite nice to me. And so she said to me, I'm just going to do a quick biopsy. So I was like, okay, so something's definitely wrong because you didn't biopsy the first time round. So she did a biopsy which took all of 10 minutes. That literally a 10-minute test. From there she then walked me down to the mammogram and I was mammogrammed, which they didn't do the first time.
No.
And she actually sat me down in a room and told me there and then that I had breast cancer. And she acknowledged the fact that she had scanned me the year before and it had appeared normal. When I asked why the biopsy and the mammogram was not done the year before, it was because they're not standard procedure under 40 unless an abnormality is found on the scan. So, because my breast cancer the year before was in its early stages, it appeared normal.
So at this point, you know that you've got breast cancer.
Yeah.
So what happened then? So they put together a treatment plan?
I then left, being given an appointment to come back and see an oncologist and breast surgeon. Following week, I had a phone call to go up for a second biopsy, a deep core biopsy. So I returned, had that done, which is done under a mammogram. It was a very unpleasant experience, lots of just pushing and pulling and needles, and it was unpleasant. Following that, I was then called in to see the breast surgeon, where I was informed that my breast cancer wasn't as simple as they would like it to be, that it was extensively throughout the breast, not just the tumour, which by a year later of originally finding it was a 7 centimetre tumour as opposed to a pea size.
Wow.
Which had spread to my lymph nodes. So it was not going to be a simple cut out the tumour, do some radiotherapy, Charlie's fix. It was now the plan of I needed chemotherapy, surgery and radiotherapy, and that my breast cancer was aggressive, was hormone negative, so lots of treatments wouldn't work for mine. And because it was such an aggressive form of cancer, I needed aggressive chemo.
And so at this point, they're just talking about breast cancer, not secondary breast cancer, not metastatic breast cancer.
No.
But
so that was the plan. I was having chemotherapy, then I was having a mastectomy, then I was having radiotherapy, and I was going to be fixed, and life was going to go on. What they do, because I'm assuming they do it with all breast cancer, but especially because mine is an aggressive form, they ordered full body and bone MRIs and CTs just as a precaution to make sure there was no spread. So my chemotherapy was booked, and then a few days later I had all these scans, and then I had a phone call to say that my chemotherapy had been put on hold as a shadow had been found in my liver.
right.
At this point, I didn't really understand what that meant, having never heard of metastatic breast cancer, and also not knowing that if it had spread, that it was then incurable, and therefore I would die from it. I didn't understand that fully. So I've got this journey to fight, bring it on, hit me with it.
Yeah.
So I had to go for a PET scan, which I did, and the PET scan showed extensive tumours within my liver. So then everything became very different. So then all surgery was stopped.
So how did you find that out? So they'd done a full body scan.
Full body scan and a PET scan which focused solely on the liver, which had to be radioactive for.
Okay, so did you go back to the hospital to get results of all of that, and that's when they go,
Actually, this is the situation. Yeah. Where they then explained to me that actually I couldn't be cured, so the breast surgery was no longer necessary because this wouldn't kill me. They needed to focus on trying to maintain the tumours in my liver.
So you sit in a room with a doctor and
Yeah.
they tell you this can't be cured.
Yeah.
Okay.
And at that point it still didn't actually sink in.
No, that's quite big information to
Yeah.
to get.
It sunk in more for my husband. He was very tearful at the time, whereas I still sat there with my game face on of, that's fine, I've got this. And it wasn't until actually my chemotherapy started the following week that it hit me. So I went for my first round of chemotherapy, which the point of is not to cure, but to reduce the cancer, to prolong life. So rather than curing, it's prolong.
So all of the conversations, all the terminology changes really quickly.
Absolutely.
Then from cure through to, like say, to prolonging life.
Your targets are not get rid of cancer free. Your targets become milestones of time.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. If at the point where you'd initially found that pea-sized lump, if they'd have done further investigation at that point in time, then this wouldn't be the route that you were on.
We wouldn't be sat here now.
We wouldn't be sat here talking.
No.
Because you'd have...
If they had done the biopsy as standard for any age, not just over 40, they would have known when it was that tiny, tiny little lump of cancer. They would have done surgery and radiotherapy at that point, a year and a half ago now. And at this point, I would be cancer-free and going about my very dull life as normal.
Okay.
If I had been 41 instead of 31, that test would have been done as standard. So if I'd known, in hindsight, if I had known now, I wouldn't have left that room without insisting that regardless of my age, because cancer doesn't care about age, and Jade Goody showed us that cancer does not care about age. So if I'd known then, I would have insisted that 2-minute biopsy was done there and then. So people who are under 40, women who are under 40, and men who are under 40 also, who find an abnormality within the breast, which doesn't just have to be a lump, it can be dimpling, it can be shrinkage of the breast, it can be changed shape of the breast. But if there is something that you're not sure about, and they say to you, oh, this scan is fine, you're only 31, you're only 35, insist that a biopsy is done, because the only way to 100% know is a biopsy, 2-minute test.
Okay. Okay.